Okay, so sports is not as specific as education per se, so I'll go over it in like more detail, but less like interactive. I'll just leave the interaction to the end. Apparently, we have two lectures, so this will probably need to last not that long for the second lecture to go ahead. Yeah, but main goal here is to solve two common misconceptions about sports, and hopefully you'll get something from this. Cool. So first misconception that I hear everyone saying, especially debaters, is that like sports is completely useless because like I'm a debater. I don't care about sports, right? Debating is my life, and therefore like there's no need for me to exercise, blah blah blah. Like I'm just gonna say in that, right? Like the majority of debaters I know probably are like this. So like first thing to say is that sports is not useless, right? There's a lot of things that sports actually has like interrelated into sports, right? Not only is it like pure sport, which is like enjoyment as a sports fan or like going out and being healthy and stuff, right? But there's also like economics, like you can debate about like salary caps, entertainment revenue. There's a whole host of things there. There's international relations, such as like hosting rights, which have a lot of political value, such as like the Olympics being boycotted or like Russia being banned from the Olympics, which it looks like they're going to be in 2024. There's also stuff like social justice, such as like transgenders in sports, all of these things. So like when you debate sport, it's not like you should probably put aside like all your like ideas that sports are useless just because like you don't do them, right? And I mean like there's quite a lot of things that sports actually contain, right? So I'm gonna go through a couple of trends in sports before going on to like more interesting stuff. But firstly, like on like sports, right? So sports is becoming like increasingly a motion that's sat at debates, like at competitions, right? Like I think like in the past couple of competitions, like every single competition I've had at least one sports motion, and that's mainly due to like growth of sports as a whole, which is to say like it's like over $500 billion worldwide right now. Like there's new markets like China and India. There's like urbanization. There's increased women's participation. There's like a fitness boom, right? Like all my friends are now like sending me TikToks about like going to the gym, and everyone's like interested in sports all of a sudden. And like there's like new digital technology, there's better ticketing, there's better like advertising and all of that, right? So like sports is increasingly becoming like an actually important thing, right? Like for example, like sports right now contributes double the amount of the economy as like I don't know film and like TV in the UK, which is like quite exceptional, right? So like sports is obviously going to be like an important thing in life. But secondly, like gambling is like gambling for sports is like 70% of like the global gambling economy right now. So like gambling looks like not only like these like millionaires betting on like horse races in those movies, right? But it's like also like these small scale things like fantasy leagues or like my friend Sean telling like Alex that like, oh, you owe me £100 if like Italy it wins in the Euros, right? Like gambling is becoming especially like a thing that actually happens in young children and in like older people because sports is actually increasing in like viewership and all of that, right? So it's actually quite important. But thirdly, like there's better tech now that actually makes people actually want to watch it, such as like real-time player data in the NFL or like baseball AI umpires. Like marketing companies can actually see what fans actually want, and this is becoming a crucial part of like teams and leagues, how the way they approach the game and how they actually attract the most viewership. So like sports is growing essentially. Yeah, cool. Okay, also like more people care just because it's like better gameplay, right? So like in the past, like gameplay could have been like absolutely terrible, but now that they've got like so much data, for example, like the NBA has like 3 point data where like they show that it's actually quite likely to score a 3 pointer. Players actually adapted to like this, and they actually want to like actually do better stuff. Like they actually want to like shoot 3 pointers is actually like quite like they're actually quite interested in this, right? Also, like, there's more talent, which is to say, like, since it's like more markets for sports, such as China and India, more talent is being recruited. So, like, more people are actually being better at sport. There's a higher likelihood that a team is going to be the best that it is. And of course, we've already talked about more viewership, yada yada. Like, just as a whole, more people care. But secondly, like, there's like new Olympic sports, right? So, like, surfing, skateboarding, karate is all becoming like Olympic sports, which weren't there before. Which means like these people, the audience you get a larger audience because like these people who originally like would be interested only in karate and not in like I don't know like gymnastics, right? They actually want to watch the Olympics now, so like more people care. Thirdly, like archival content, like especially like during COVID, right? Like people didn't have access to live sports because like people didn't play these live games, and so studios had to run like reruns, had to run like analysis to keep people interested, right? To engage like viewers in their channels. There's a lot of creativity coming out, like storytelling about teams, like the story of, I don't know, LeBron James and like a 20-minute YouTube video about that, right? Like this is like what actually attracts like audiences, and like it's increased a lot since COVID. So actually more people care about it. So yeah, sports is still becoming big. Okay. Thirdly, like on like changing perceptions, which is to say like there's a lot more progressivism in sports, right? It's like BLM taking the knee in NBA, right? Like Cleveland Indians, like Washington Redskins actually changing their names because of like racist connotations, right? Of like controversy of like LeBron James not standing in solidarity with like the Hong Kong protesters, right? There's a lot of like progressivism that actually trickles down in sports because like now, since more people are watching it, like since progressivism is becoming a bigger thing, now it also trickles down in sports. People actually care about what these teams are actually saying, right? And like also along the lines, like women's events are becoming a lot more popular, right? Like FIFA Women's Cup, the Cricket Women's Cup, become like the most viewed women's events in history, and these are like very recent, right? There's more interest in these events, as well as like more women playing these events as a whole because they're like told that they can actually do these things. But thirdly, like athletes now have a control over their image, which is to say like previously all the athletes images are like from like TV where they like get like their 10-minute interviews after a game. They say, oh, I'm very proud, I worked very hard. But now there's like social media, which is accessed by like a whole host of audiences, right? Like young people as well as like old people, right? There's like a whole bunch of people who actually now can focus on these athletes telling their own stories through social media. And that's when you get athletes actually able to like not just be like some like model like sponsoring like Nike, right? They actually like are able to like generate their own personality in some sort of way. Once again, that brings more attraction to them, etc., etc. And also there's more focus on athlete safety. I think that's pretty obvious. When more people watch it, then like people are more like caring for like how the athlete actually does, because the average person doesn't want to see like people get injured or like break their neck while playing rugby, right? So there's quite a lot of like changing perceptions that occurs when more people watch sport. So cool. But now like there are some concerns like to do with like sports, which is say like, for example, children in the status quo, I think they're like quitting sports a lot earlier than they used to. I've read somewhere that they quit at the age of 11 rather than 14. And like, it's like, there's a lot of reasons for this. For example, they quit earlier because like right now, COVID is one of the most obvious reasons, because like there was like, you couldn't go out for like 2 years. But also like there's like inadequate coaching. There's a lot of stress that comes with sports. There's a lot of cost barriers, as we talked about yesterday, how like if we're not just like everyone's rich, right? Everyone, like people are actually unable to afford these things, right? So children, less participation is quite a big concern. But secondly, more like on a grand scale is like organization and like governance, right? Like there's a lot of corruption in sports. For example, like there's like US accusing like there's like bribery to win hosting rights, for example, Qatar to win like the FIFA hosting rights, right? Like there's a lot of like potential corruption that occurs in the sports industry, right? And like there's stuff like match fixing where like people like throw games to like get a betting revenue, right? Because gambling once again is becoming like extremely important in sports. But also like this means that there's like more reliance on like sports managers getting more power, because like players are not sure what to do in this like very corrupt, like becoming more and more like corrupt industry, right? So there's like quite a lot of problems that are occurring with like the growth of sports, right? But then, okay, so this is where I'm gonna spend like my rest of my lecture, which is like the second big misconception, right? Because I don't do sports, so I can't debate it, right? Like there's a lot of things that you can bring in from other debates into sports debates. And that's like very like obvious. Like firstly, like as I've already told you, like economics, for example, like you can talk about a whole host of things that you can bring in from economics debates, such as like who's losing revenue, right? I think the most important thing that comes here is like the impacts, right? So like there's so many impacts that sports actually has, right? Not only is it like a source of fun, like you get healthy, right? But like there's a lot of reasons, right? You get like communities, you get like identities actually formed, right? You get like economic things, and you get like these political causes actually advanced, right? So I think like things that you do in normal debates, you can also do in sports debates, right? Like the reason I picked sports when like Rajas gave me a whole host of things is because like sports actually encompasses like economics, encompasses like politics, right? It's not like it encompasses like a whole host of things, like perhaps not in as much detail as all of these other things, but at least like sports isn't like isn't like education where you have like these like fundamental clashes that occur in every single debate, right? Sports actually has like quite a lot of a large range of actual types of emotions, right? So that's like what I'm trying to get to you, right? So like for example, like we can talk about actors, right? So like fans, are they rational or not, right? Like we can talk about how fans usually they don't act in the correct way because they have like a mob culture. For example, like Sweden, I hear it's the lowest crime rates in like Europe, but they have the highest violence at like sport in Europe, right? There's like the social capital of being in your friend group, right? Where you're all like you want to support a team because all of your friends are supporting that same team and you actually want to do stuff, right? A lot of people don't act rationally as fans, but also like athletes, right? Like presumably in a debate about sports, you're not going to care that much about the athletes because like as my partner Sean's like tried to convince me day and day again, how it's all about like off-court behavior, but actually athletes have quite a lot of importance in sports, believe it or not, right? Like obviously if you get a worse quality athletes, then like fewer people watch sport, there's less enjoyment, you might even get backlash, right? Like in motions such as like this house would implement like quotas, racial quotas into like teams, there's obviously like arguments to be made where like you get sorry, bad pronunciation list. Sorry, yeah, worth athletes, right? You get like worse athletes, and therefore people actually are backlashing against you. And that's like what I've told you about yesterday, which is like the education motions, right? And you can like bring in all of that stuff from like education, where you're talking about like whether you want to protect these athletes in the long term or whether you want to like give them an opportunity in the short term, right? But also like you can talk about like how economically these athletes actually have a big impact, such as like motions about wage caps, right? Like you can talk about like if you do have wage caps, then you're likely to have like less like talented athletes trying to get into sports, for example, because they don't want to earn as little money, right? Because they can go other ways, right? But then opposition can come in and say like, no, they don't have any other skills, so they still want to do sports. Sports is still like quite viewed, right? And like we're just talking about like wage caps can drive away some athletes, but in the whole, it doesn't. It might not, right? But economically, there's a lot of things to consider there as well, right? For example, a recent motion that I've done is like this house regrets the transition of like sports to social media rather than from like on TV, right? So to make this slightly interactive, so I don't go droning on and on again, I'll go and ask someone for a government argument. Ishani. Okay, hello.
Uh, so I didn't really like quite understand like your question.
Okay. So the motion that I'm giving you here is this house regrets the transition of sports broadcasting from TV to social media. Can you give me a government argument for that?
I guess like well, a lot of the times like older generations don't like have social media, I guess. So like now they won't get like a chance to like participate because it's moving to social media and off of TV.
For sure, for sure. And like in the same idea, what would be like an opposition argument to that? Like what would opposition say in response to that?
Um, I guess it could like spread a lot faster and easily, like because if it was just on TV, then like it might just be like on one channel and that would like not spread, like the information wouldn't spread fast enough um uh, uh compared to like multiple social media platforms, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you talked about how old people don't have access to social media. I guess you can also talk about how young people are less likely to watch TV when they have social media or these short form like videos, such as like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, right? They're much more likely to be accessing it through social media. You could talk about, and then you can do the weighing, which is to say, why do we care more about young people perhaps you can say they're more of a long-term investment. They'll be interested in sports their entire lives, etc., etc. Whereas old people, they might like be very particular about their sports, right? But also with the same motion, we can talk about it economically, right? So like, let's get like an economic argument from Ruhan. Why is it bad economically that we get transition from like TV to social media? Yeah.
It's that like usually like social media is like free, and for like TV, you have to like buy like a service, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Like by transitioning from like TV to actually social media, a lot of people actually lose their jobs, right? Believe it or not, actually people have jobs in like presenting sports, in broadcasting sports, in all of these things. And like now that you can say that like so many people are actually watching like sports for free on social media, there's no need for these people anymore, and they all lose their jobs. They all live like terrible lives now because they have no source of income. You can talk about that, right? So like sports actually has quite a lot of stuff economically, right? So also like internationally, there's like quite a lot of stuff as well, right? So I've already talked about like hosting rights, such as like Olympics or World Cup, right? So for example, a motion of this would be like this house would primarily give like hosting rights of the World Cup to developing countries, let's say. What would be a prop argument for that, Brian? Any ideas?
Uh, so like prop is against or for again.
Is for. So you
Uh,
want to give rights to developing countries.
Because that gives them an opportunity to like earn more money and gain international recognition, like
Yeah.
of their abilities to do things.
Exactly. Yeah. So once again, this is like not only like economical, where you get like a lot more tourism. I think you're trying to tell us, right? And you get like a lot more recognition. Maybe people are more willing to trade with you, but also like you get the public image, as you've told us, where you like politically you're getting like more recognition as well because you're actually doing a good job. Now, what would be the counter argument to this, Ruhan? Any ideas?
There are like less like resources in the country, so when they put it towards like a stadium and things like that, it's going to be like the experience won't be as good, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I see where you're going. But what is the impact of the experience not being good? Why is that important?
Um, Not as many people will come.
People won't come. Yeah, and why is this like a counter argument to what Brian has just told us?
I'm not sure. It's more of like just like an opposition point.
Yeah, I think if you can tell us that like developing nations don't have as much resources, they could mess up like the organization, then you can talk about how people not coming, it makes like not this good image that like Brian's trying to tell us, right? And you can actually ruin your economy in the future when people think that you're hosting the Olympics is firstly like unfair, but also like you're just doing it in a trash way, then people don't actually recognize you as much. Yeah, what are you gonna say?
Yeah. No, I was agreeing.
Cool. Yeah. So like there's quite a lot of like political things that could actually go into sports as well, right? I think the main thing to take away here is that sports actually is like important. It actually has a lot of things relating to it, and I can't reiterate this enough, right? Like all the arguments that you can bring in from like other debates as well, such as even like the ones about education that I talked to you yesterday about, like you can bring that all into sports as well. And I think that that's when like you can actually like access sports, right? Like for example, an argument about like a motion about like this house as Messi would leave Barcelona. Like I don't know much about Messi. I don't know much about Barcelona because I don't watch football. But I can still like act on like the personal level where I can talk about like Messi. He's gonna be hated by like a lot of fans, for example, and like there's gonna be a lot of backlash for him. He's not gonna be able to like get a new like job, for example, or like stuff like that. Like maybe that's not very like believable, but like you know what I mean. You can bring in like arguments that are not necessarily specific to sports, and you don't need sports knowledge to actually like debate these motions. And as a result, you can actually talk about these things, right? Like fans, you can think of them as like a voter base, right? You can think of them as like a government voter base, and how they're the ones who decide how like sports clubs are run. And on the other side, you can frame them as like an economic like generation, right? A profit generator for like the clubs as a whole. So you get like these things that you can frame as fans that are not necessarily sports based, and you can weigh them up against each other. So what I'm saying is like you don't need to know that much about sports, but you do still need to know much about like debating, right? But I'm sure you guys all know that. So like last thing to talk about is like alternatives, right? So sports alternatives is mostly like other things or other debates alternatives as well, right? Like when there's a policy such as like people get to buy out players, right? An alternative could be like drafts. People get the first pick of a player, and that could be more fair. You can talk about all of these types of alternatives, such as like, for example, in the NBA, I think there's a revenue sharing consortium. So like you can have loads of alternatives for these debates as well. So as a whole, treat a sports motion like every other type of motion that you've ever had, right? You don't have to know about sports. I mean, like maybe you do know about sports that could be useful, but it's not going to help you win the debate. What helps you win the debate is all the stuff that I've already told you yesterday, right? All of like that weighing that Sean's told you about, all of this like strategy that you actually get, and all of like everything else, right? So we tell so like what I'm trying to say is that like don't panic when you don't know about sports and you get a sports motion. You can still talk about economics, you can still talk about like internationals, you can still analyze like actors, right? And that's when you are able to actually win the debate. People don't give like wins just because you know examples of sports. People actually give wins when you have the proper analysis. And yeah, cool. So cool.